Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and in this video I'm going to tell you how Joe Rogan does his no-sugar ketogenic diet and the performance benefits that brings to him and how they work. So, if you know Joe Rogan, you might know that he's a big fan of the ketogenic diet. And he's talked about this many times on his podcast, and he's probably a big reason of why people actually know about the keto diet. And that's another reason why I want to make this video, because I want to draw people in who are curious about it, who have heard about it from Joe Rogan, and educate you guys a little bit on how it actually has a lot of performance benefits, because a lot of those are twisted and end up being presented very incorrectly with a lot of his guests, with scientists, with other people who are in the fitness and dieting community. So the first part of this video is going to be explaining some of Joe Rogan's foods that he eats, that I'm pretty sure he eats, from what I was able to dig up. And the second part, which is going to be sprinkled throughout this video, is explaining the performance benefits and how this diet actually works. Because like I said, a lot of the studies and a lot of the scientific literature on this actually, well, not the scientific literature, because that's how I've learned a lot of this stuff. The scientific studies themselves are not commonly done in people who are fat adapted like Joe Rogan would be, and they're typically done in people who aren't as good at the diet. So not in terms of their ability to do it, it's about their body's ability metabolically to reap the best benefits of this diet. So most of the studies take place in individuals who aren't fat adapted, and I will explain those benefits. And Joe Rogan's diet is very conducive to maximizing the benefits that you'd get from this diet. So I'll explain that in a moment, but starting off with his foods, Joe Rogan's main food goals are not calorie restrictive. They're typically, he'll eat whatever calorie amount he wants throughout the day, and that's also because he's at a low body fat. He's not trying to cut down, as far as I know, and he wouldn't, because he's in good shape. He's doing this to maintain a performance level and a level of body composition that he likes. So there's no calorie restriction. He probably does a lot of fasting, especially if you know some of the guests who've been on his show, like Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Dominic D'Agostino. A lot of those people have talked about fasting, how it goes hand in hand with keto dieting, and the benefits of intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. So when it comes to the foods he actually eats, I'm very certain that most of Joe Rogan's meats come from the fact that he's a big hunter. He eats a lot of game meats. He probably hunts a fair amount of his actual meat consumption is probably hunted by him or others that he knows. But even if it isn't, I know this guy is going to be eating mostly pasture-raised, grass-fed, cage-free, high-quality meats, animals that have been fed the best diets and lived in the best conditions. So game meats and actual nutrient-dense animal fat, animal protein sources are probably the biggest source of caloric intake that Joe Rogan eats on this diet. It's mostly going to be predominantly animal fats, animal proteins, very carnivore-esque main meals. However, there's a lot of vegetables thrown around in there. And Joe Rogan's talked about, eating salads every day, getting other micronutrients from greens, and using them almost to fill up his stomach and help with digestion, mixing everything together. As far as snacks, Joe Rogan eats very few processed foods. The only processed foods I've ever heard him mention that were ketogenic or low sugar, low carb, are when he's talked about getting care packages from Quest Nutrition. So that's the Quest bars, Quest chips, whatever other protein snacks they send to him on a sponsorship deal, basically. So the only processed foods this guy's eating are basically, protein snacks that are already low carb, low sugar. Everything else that he's going to be eating for snacks is going to be things like nuts. He's talked about macadamia nuts before. He's talked with Brendan Schaub about almonds with cinnamon. Other snacks, he probably eats a decent amount of dairy, but like I said, the bulk of his food is going to be those animal meats. His actual performance benefits this guy gets are going to come from the fact that he is fat adapted. So that's the main reason why I want to make this video, because I want to explain the benefits of fat adaptation. And because Joe Rogan eats so many quality animal sources of fat and protein, because because he eats so many quality sources of meat, he's going to be getting a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins. So that means vitamin D, E, A, and K. And all of those vitamins are very underprescribed in a lot of diets. If you've learned about bodybuilding, fitness, nutrition, if that's an interest of yours, you rarely probably hear people talk about those things. And especially if they're doing carbohydrate-based diets most of the time, macro diets, because they don't have an emphasis on increasing the amounts of fat-soluble vitamins. Now, animal meats and animal sources are always going to be the best source of bioavailable animal nutrients. So mainly the K1, the K2, the D3, vitamin A in its animal form, which is better for your body. And typically, things like eggs, especially because Joe Rogan's talked about eggs, but I'm assuming they're pasture raised. Those are going to be a very great source of amino acids and fat-soluble vitamins. So the bulk of his meals are going to be coming from those meats, a little bit of vegetables sprinkled in there, very run-of-the-mill keto diet with a couple snacks like nuts and very low glycemic carb sources in his diet. So he's typically only getting his carbs from green vegetables and little snacks. The reason you're going to want to do that is because when you do this diet, it's almost more about your carb sources rather than your total amount of carbs. I'll explain that. So if you're getting all your carbs from green vegetables, you're going to be getting your carbs from fibrous, low glycemic sources, which are very unlikely to affect your level of ketosis. So ketosis is important, but fat-adapted ketosis is infinitely better. And a lot of the studies have shown that ketosis in the first phase, so after 3 days, when you're in ketosis, after you've depleted your liver glycogen, you're going to have very minimal performance benefit. It's just a result of your body not being good enough at the diet metabolically. When you are fat adapted, your body's going to be way more metabolically flexible, which means that it's going to be able to use carbs, so stored carbs, and body fat, so stored fat, way more efficiently. So basically what that looks like is your body's going to store certain amounts of glycogen in your muscles, right? Whether it gets that from the carbs that you ate in a bowl of lettuce with a big salad, or whether it gets that from excess protein, which it converts into carbs through gluconeogenesis, which is the process of turning protein into carbs. So basically, any excess protein and any carbs you actually eat are going to be turned into carbohydrates, glycogen, stored into your muscles. And if you're not getting those from fruit, which is because they're going to go right to your liver glycogen, it's going to be way easier of an experience for you. So get your carbs from low glycemic sources. It doesn't matter if you eat 50 grams of broccoli or 50 grams of carbs worth of broccoli. It's going to be better for you than eating, a small bowl of oats. That's going to be way more damaging to your diet, and it will make sticking to the diet way worse because it's going to really spike your blood sugar if you're eating starchier, higher glycemic load foods. So Joe Rogan definitely does not do that. He definitely gets most of his carbohydrates from either planned carb refeeds, right, before an exercise or something like that, but he does that probably very rarely, and that's good because that means that he's getting most of his performance benefits from the stored carbs in his muscles and the ability to use fat very efficiently. So that ends up looking like your body has systemic access to fats for 80% of its activities. And for the 20% of most intense activity, Joe Rogan is going to be, when he's fighting a guy in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, a lot of the intense grappling and all that stuff is going to be mostly carbohydrates that are stored in his muscles being used for the most intensive activities. When he's doing really heavy benches, 4 reps or less, that's going to be carbohydrates. That's going to be all the anaerobic, so without oxygen exercises. And that's the main benefit of this fat adaptation, because your body is going to store those carbs and use them for the most intense activity. And Joe Rogan's talked about how on vacation before, he's gotten out of the diet in an improper way, ate a bunch of junk food, and he's felt terrible. And the thing is, when you eat a lot of starchy carbs, like he mentioned that in the video I'm referencing, like burritos and stuff like that, and he was in Mexico on vacation, when he's eating those foods, that's going to shock your body. And if you're eating, lower glycemically dense foods, when you're getting out of this diet, your body's going to use those very efficiently. And you don't need those carbs when you're fat adapted. The whole point is that when you are fat adapted, your body's going to be using fat and carbs way more efficiently. And there's one point here that I really want to hammer home, because there's one video where Joe Rogan's talking to Dr. Galpin, I believe is his name. And this guy is saying basically that ketosis has shown in studies that you don't have performance benefits because people can't store carbs in their muscles. Now, I actually left a comment on that video, and maybe that's why you're here, but I made a comment countering that, because when you're fat adapted, your body actually does store carbohydrates, and that is where the high level athletes get most of their performance benefits, because the ability to use glucose only comes after fat adaptation, or to use stored glucose only comes after fat adaptation. And your body's going to be way better at storing glucose and using it at the right times after fat adaptation. So for Joe Rogan, this means he can go out and kill a session kicking a bag for hours on end, because that's what he does apparently. He can do that, and most of his energy requirements for that, those quick roundhouse kicks and stuff like that, is going to come from the stored carbohydrates in his body. And that's just an adaptation of being patient with this diet. The fats are going to be used for, your body has so much access to fat that it is ridiculous, that even if you're ridiculously lowering your calorie intake, your body's going to have enough energy, because your body fat, as long as you're not 4% body fat, has access to like 30,000 calories. So what that means is, even if you're calorie restricted like I am, I'm doing a 1,000 calorie deficit, and my lifts are increasing as a result of being fat adapted. Because even if you're only taking in 2,000 calories a day, what's going to happen is your body doesn't have to use the calories that you took in yesterday for food. It can use the calories that are stored on your body as fat, and it's going to be way better at that when you're fat adapted, like how Joe Rogan's diet easily permits, as long as you've done it for longer than a month or so. Now, my heaviest lifts, my anaerobic lifts, the first few reps of my heavier sets are going to be coming predominantly from the creatine phosphate system. So that's a ATP generating system in your body, energy generating system in your body, and the rest of the breathing based exercises, or any lifting that you can do while breathing. So, as long as you're not going for 1 rep maxes, you should be fine with this, is going to be used by ketones and fatty acids. So this diet, the performance benefits that this gets, is severely undersold, because when you are fat adapted, you can do things, you can occupy your day how Joe Rogan does. If you're getting a good amount of nutrient dense foods, nutrient dense meats with fat soluble vitamins, which are great for your hormones, great for your testosterone, great for your overall health, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to, for Joe Rogan's diet, that means that he's able to, film podcasts at night, do MMA training in the daytime, go around meeting all these people that he meets, and doing hunting and all that other stuff that he does. And basically, your energy levels throughout the day are going to be way more sustainable, because fat is a great source for a lot of low intensity activity. And most of people's days is either low to moderate intensity activity. If you do construction or something like that, yeah, you'll have higher energy needs. But if you're working an office job, if you're doing anything that doesn't require you to lift heavy objects all day long, your body's going to use only fat for those activities. And then when you do your training, that's where the stored carbs are going to come in. That's where the main performance benefits are going to come, because you can diet, you can lose body fat and force your body to burn more body fat in the daytime. And then when it comes time for high intense activities, you still have enough amount of carbs stored in your body to use during those activities. And there were a couple studies that I've seen where they've taken marathon runners and endurance athletes that were fat adapted, and they had the same amounts, if not better amounts, of glycogen in their muscles after completing like Ironmans or marathons, and they had the same, if not better amounts of glycogen remaining than carb-based athletes. And that was one of the few studies I've actually seen that's compared fat adapted athletes to carb-based athletes. But the point I'm trying to make here is, the main benefit of this diet that I want you to wrap your head around is, the performance benefits are going to come because you can lower your calories and your body's still able to tap into calories. It's still able to tap into fat. It's almost as if you change the metabolic system your body's using, your body doesn't need extra calories, because it's going to have an engine that is more equipped to burn stored calories. So when you're doing a carbohydrate-based diet and you're calorie restricting, your body's not going to be as efficient at burning fat. So if you drop your calories by too much, and you drop your carbs by too much, and you're still carb-based, you're not going to have enough energy. And if you're eating 1,000 calorie deficit on a carb-based diet, your body's going to be always looking for glucose and mostly using glucose, except for like when you're sleeping, fasting, and in between meals that are longer apart. And most of your energy needs are going to be used by carbs. And if you really want to micromanage and really get the best of results out of a fat loss program and retain your muscle at the same time, going keto is a great way to do that. It's going to have access to all the stored calories in your body, and it's going to have an engine that's able to do that throughout the entire day. It's only going to not burn fat for energy when it needs to. So if you're doing heavy, intense training, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, heavy lifting, all that stuff is going to be handled by stored glycogen, which you will only receive after, or will be way better at producing after fat adaptation takes place. And as far as the nutrient density of your diet will go, if you're eating ketogenic and eating high quality meats, high quality animal proteins and fats, any calorie restricted diet is going to be way better because you're going to be actually getting more nutrients. Typical macro-based, carbohydrate-based diets don't allow for as much fat-soluble vitamin intake. And studies are showing, science is showing that those nutrients are some of the most important in your body and the hardest to get unless you're eating good amounts of animal fat and animal protein and good quality sources of those. So as far as it concerns you, Joe Rogan's diet is a great example of where to get your nutrients from, how to fit your greens in, where to get your snacks from on a keto diet, a no sugar diet, how to make it sustainable, and how to make high performance, frequent high performance, not only doable, but improve perhaps. And in my experience, that's definitely been the case. I've been on a 1,000 calorie deficit for the past few months, and I've noticed slow but steady fat loss, very minimal muscle loss, if any. If anything, I've noticed that I've gained strength on many key lifts, and I think I've actually perhaps even gained muscle. So, I mean, it's very, very difficult to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. However, this diet is the most conducive to doing that, since it is the most likely to spare your muscle, because ketones, just being in your blood, are going to make your body less likely to burn protein. The fact that ketones are in your blood have shown that protein is less likely to be used as an energy source. Any excess proteins, any excess carbs are going to be turned into glycogen for your muscles. You're going to be feeling better because fat is not a roller coaster like energy source. It's a much more stable source that can be used for 80% of your activities in the daytime. So that's basically the gist of this video. I hope that if you're somebody who follows Joe Rogan, this video has given you some insight on how to actually do his diet, why he does his diet, and what performance benefits he gets from it. This is a big passion of mine, and this is what I want my page to be about. I want to spread the word of how keto diets are very conducive to athletic performance, and I want to make a push for people to do more studies, more experiments on themselves, and see how this diet can help your performance while you're losing fat. It's, in my opinion, the best way to do any fat loss program. It's always going to result in, if you do it properly, better amounts of muscle spared, perhaps even gained, and it's going to be way more enjoyable, and it's a much better lifestyle than what I think is out there on YouTube and fitness, nutrition, bodybuilding sphere. So, if you like this video, if you learned something, please subscribe. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about. My name is Anthony Romano. Peace.